I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I'm trying to capitalize on what is already helping the majority of people. The people who come to the practice, the people who do protocols like this, it's not sitting there passively. You earn it. You work for it. Because once we know, we can manipulate the system, or you have free reign to say, okay, well, what function do I want to increase out of this? How do I want to use it in my favor?
Welcome back to Guiding Tides. Welcome back to Guiding Tides. Today, our guest is Dr. Lars Landers from Restorative Neuro in Natick, Massachusetts. I've had the pleasure of working with Lars personally. We did a lot of brain optimization, which I will have him explain a little bit further. Lars, without further ado, can you kind of walk us through what Restorative Neuro is, what kind of services that you offer there?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. So Restorative Neuro is meant to be as much of a one-stop shop for improving brain function as I can create. So when you come to Restorative Neuro, our first goal is to measure where is a person's brain function and how do we think we can improve it, and measurably, objectively, in as many situations as we can. So the idea is nobody's going to respond to the same treatment the same way. So my philosophy is you need a lot of different treatment options in one space to say what works best for this person, but guided by the philosophy of what does the research and the science say should work for a brain, and go from there. So where we can measure objectively using QEEG brain mapping and neural timing assessment and balance assessments to say this is how this brain and body are functioning objectively right now. Collect subjective information from the patient, but how do you feel? And then use our treatment methods, go through a course of care, whether it's regular maintenance or intensive sessions. And by the end of it, if and when a patient says, I feel better in the way that mattered most to me in coming here, my chief complaint, we can look at the function objectively and say, we are fairly certain that you feeling better correlates to or is caused by the fact that your brain is functioning better, which means it's much more sustainable in the long run as well. So that's what we do.
That's awesome.
I gotta say, it was a very unique experience doing it. So I had gone in there initially because I was experiencing vertigo, and I've seen many doctors, and it's kind of the same thing. Everything's checked out, everything's fine. So by chance, I ended up going to see Dr. Lars, and he did all this testing. We put the wires and the stuff on my head, and it was pretty wild looking. I got to take pictures and send it to my closest people. But what was fascinating to me was that he was able to give me that data. He could essentially, from my take, see what I was experiencing and feeling with the OCD thoughts, primarily more so, I would say, the anxiety, kind of what my brain was doing, which maybe you can explain that a little bit better. How can you look at that? Like, is it kind of flaring up? Are there different colors? Like, what were you seeing on your end?
Sure. So a quantitative EEG brain map is essentially, it's capturing the electrical behavior in the different regions of your brain and comparing that information to the electrical behavior of what you call the normative database, the people who don't have those symptoms, who don't have a history of injury, who report they're sleeping well every night. And I don't know if you know any of those people. I'm certainly not in the database. But basically, decades of research have gone into this process of saying, when we measure the electrical behavior in the brain, generated at the level of the neurons, if it's much more active in this set of frequencies and in this region, we can expect that to contribute to a certain symptom. And one that will really resonate with people is, for instance, if you have far too much very fast activity that won't stop, won't slow down, is not equally represented across the other frequencies, or there's not enough energy given to those frequencies, then that person, you can imagine, is probably exhibiting some type of anxiety or hypervigilance or something where they don't feel calm. And that's a very generic explanation of what you can infer from the brain map. But it is an objective measurement of what's going on in the brain right then. And it's a map to, okay, well, we could have flown blind and guessed about where to apply our treatments. And that's the job of a doctor, is to be able to make a very educated guess based on what treatments we've seen work in the past, et cetera. But having the brain map says, this is what your brain is doing. Here's the region we need to prioritize to get that area of the brain to stop doing this because we believe it's contributing to the symptoms you report. And it helps us decide which treatments to apply and how, because sometimes you need to excite an area and sometimes you need to inhibit the behavior in an area, and it's complex until you see the map. And then I suppose it's always complex, but it's a simple approach.
All right, so I just want to make sure I'm on pace with you. So when you look at the mapping with the QEEG, all right, so you have the QEEG and you see a map of the brain, right? And you're focusing on an area of the brain that's firing off the neurons, the nerves. So the nerves in the brain that are overactive. And you're seeing other areas of the brain that are not as active.
Yeah, it gets...
In this example that you're presenting.
Sure.
So from that, it's helping you focus on an area that needs attention. Then you're deciding, how am I going to apply a strategy to address this area, whether stimulating or, would you say, deadening, not
or
deadening?
Inhibiting. And modulating behavior of the neurons in that area. And the thing is, we're not just going to, okay, you can have an incidental finding of a disc derangement in your spine that you went in there, you said, I need this imaging, this MRI for some other reason, and they found that I had a bulging disc. But it's never caused me symptoms, and that's not what I was here for. It's an interesting finding, but if it's not contributing to symptoms, it's incidental, right? So the only thing I would refine about what you said is that we're correlating what's happening in there specifically to that patient's symptom set. Because I'm not going to look at somebody's brain and say, well, there's a little less slow wave activity here in the frontal lobes than the typical presentation or the normative database. But if it doesn't correspond to that specific, their needs, the function they want to improve, then something else will take priority.
Okay.
You can have a phased approach where, of course, you say this, let's say somebody reports anxiety. We're trying to get the brain to function in a different way so that it doesn't generate the anxiety. So phase one would be, let's focus on where we think that's happening in the brain based off of the brain map. And the other things we saw in other areas or other frequencies can become phase two if the person wants to prioritize that. But my goal is, like every physician, to knock the biggest domino first.
So a lot of this depends on self-reporting.
Yes, absolutely.
Your assessment of their needs, of what you're going to address, is going to be dictated by, yeah, doc, I'm not sleeping enough. I'm waking up. I have anger issues. I feel like anxious when I'm driving to work. I want to rip everybody's head off. You know,
So you
I'm
got
jittery.
my paperwork.
Yeah.
Not to interrupt, but to make this conversation a little bit easier, Lars and Mahesh.
Yeah.
I give you full permission if you want to kind of explain what you've seen. I can kind of go back and forth so Mahesh can understand this a little bit better from a real life perspective.
So yes, self-reporting. I mean, if you think of it in terms of somebody going to the dentist, if you show up at the dentist and they say, what are you here for? And you go, I don't know, you just seemed like a good thing to do today. You're like, I have absolutely nowhere to start with you. Why are you here? So that never happens, right? When people show up, they know exactly what they want to see improve. And they know, in my practice, I'm not their first stop. They've tried a lot, if not everything they could come up with along the way, because the collection of treatments that I use in this style of treatment is not very well known yet. and that's going to change in the future just based on the results people are getting. But it is it's new in a lot of ways, at least the combination of these things. So what Christian is talking about when he comes in to the office and says, here are the things, my top 2 or 3 things that I'd love to see become easier in my life, when anxiety and panic is at the top of that list, and we go back, that's what he's reporting. And then he also fills out a Hamilton Anxiety Rating Scale and a PHQ-9 for depression. And each patient fills out all of those so that I don't miss anything. I have every patient fill out a post-concussion symptom scale because that's a great marker of neurological symptoms, whether you had a head injury or not. My goal is to see how much that, I don't want to miss an opportunity to see how much that person assesses their symptom set to have changed during the course of care. But how I sleep at night, and I say this all the time, is that I'm looking at the objective data and going, well, that brain absolutely functions better than when we started. So that's cool that you're reporting a decrease in anxiety. I bet it has something to do with your brain being much better at regulating itself. And of course, I'm being flip. Of course it means that.
But these scales that you're using are established scales used across several professions. I use the same scales, when I'm talking to somebody about rating their depression. So we have this vocabulary that we understand each other.
Yeah.
I don't want someone coming to me because they didn't get the right phone case and they're depressed. That's not, for me, something I can treat for depression. My parents going through a divorce. I'm cutting myself. Don't have any friends. Okay. That's giving me teeth, to sink into these issues. So when you're hearing from these scales that, there's a level of depression that where someone is measured moderate, it's a scale embraced by modalities that treat mental health on a regular basis, that everyone understands what moderate means. Just to explain to you guys, why he's using these scales.
Right. And we would be missing an opportunity to capture how that person feels differently on day 10 versus day 1. Because even our own self-assessment is unreliable and it changes from day to day. So I'm looking for trends more than anything. That's the nature of a subjective assessment, is somebody saying, today I feel like this, but my dog did die on the way here, so that might have something to do with it. We can't control for that, and we don't try to. If a person comes in and their subjective assessment says that they're more symptomatic on day 10 than when we started on day 1, and yet they're reporting to me that they feel so much better, we see the flaw in the subjective assessment. But we go back to the neural timing assessment and see, well, you process information down to the millisecond so much more accurately than you did before. Your distribution of electrical activity in your brain matches much better with the normative database now than when you started. And you tell me you feel better. There we go. And of course, I tell people all the time that I align my treatment protocols with what does the research say is helping people. Keep it simple where you can. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I'm trying to capitalize on what is already helping the majority of people, but not relying on any standalone tools. So to describe the practice a little bit more, anybody familiar with neurofeedback? It's essentially using that brain map you collect to then do operant conditioning to show the brain over time that it is advantageous to behave differently electrically, which it can do. It does do all of the time. We're just not tracking it.
You're training the brain, right?
Yeah. Using software, showing the brain that, oh, when you did this thing a little differently, we liked that. So there's a reward process in the brain. At that level, it takes the cues and it says, well, that seemed to work better for me. Maybe I'll do it that way from now on.
What I find fascinating, looking at neurology, so when you develop patterns, those neurons that support that pathway of processing become stronger because you're doing it over time. Like, it's a physical thing in your head attached to your brain that becomes stronger because you're repeating behavior, positive or negative, right? So, I mean, alcoholism, repeated patterns, those neurons will get stronger. You know, if I'm living a healthy lifestyle and I have my structure of getting up, going to the gym, you know, I drink my protein shake, and that's my routine. My routines establish my behavior, hence my emotional status. But the marriage of that to the neurology is like, what? I find that like that's amazing.
It's fascinating, and what we're really talking about is getting down to the root of how it has always worked. And for some people to realize that everything you experience is dictated by the connections and the behaviors of your neurons, from your personality to your emotional experience to your memories to interpretations of sensory stimuli, accuracy of motor movements, all of that stuff is just which neurons were connected to which other neurons and where were they headed, what was their job. And when you reduce an existence down to that, that can be pretty shaking for some people.
It is, yeah.
But the reality is the magic is all in there too. And I don't mean that to be too, you know, I generally don't talk in terms like that. It is science, but it doesn't take any of the mystery of our complex existence away. It just gives us the keys to how to make a person's individual experience and quality of life and function better.
That's crazy.
I've seen a neuropsychologist before. Seeing a neuropsychologist changed my life because I got the correct diagnoses. I was able to get put on the right medication for what I needed. So, but like taking it further to that next level of brain mapping and all of that you do, I think that would just optimize my life so much more.
I got to jump in on that because I did it, and it may seem biased because Lars is here on the show. He was a pillar in my life becoming that much better. It's not that I just feel better. My wife sees it, my friends see it. Mahesh, Jess have both commented on this.
Yeah.
You know, where I was before, so I suffered from, I'll use that, I guess, lightly, but I was really battling with panic attacks, anxiety, depression, and I had gone through IOP programs, PHP, I did EMDR, I did ERP, so all these different types of therapies. And I feel as though that got my brain where it needed to be, but I kind of hit a plateau, and I was at the end of my rope. I'm like, what else do I do? I tried all these different things, some woo-woo, some proven, but by fate, I found Lars, and the man that I walked in as versus the man I came out as are two different people. And I thank you for everything you do, and you should make an appointment. You should make an appointment. All of you should make an appointment because it did something for me. He can see it on his data, and he showed me. I wasn't shocked when I seen it. My good days are amazing, and my bad days are now good after working with Lars. And that was only over a 10-day spread. I can't even imagine if we did more work, when we do more work, where we're going to be at. So I just want to take a second to say thank you. You saved me. You made me you helped me become a better husband to my wife and father to my children. And I mean that. There's a word that's kind of circulating in my head right now, and I know it's so well spoken on: neuroplasticity. What role does that play in this?
I appreciate that, by the way. And it's important to note that the people who come to the practice, the people who do protocols like this, it's not sitting there passively. You earn it. You work for it. And this goes into neuroplastic change. So neuroplasticity is the quality of the brain, its ability to reach out and make new neural connections to improve function. And there's beauty in that too, because if your brain practices something new long enough, then that becomes the strongest available pathway for nerve signals, essentially, to travel. And once that becomes the best way to do things, it becomes the default way to respond to things. And then anything that is deemed by the brain during its self-assessment process to be a waste of energy, such as the old, less efficient ways to do things,
They die off.
they atrophy and they go away because it's a waste of energy. So
Amazing.
I believe this is the reason that when we take the time, which does require a number of sessions to lock in new function, you take the time to build a new default way to do things, and the brain doesn't revert to a worse way to do things on its own anyway, because that worse way to do things, the less efficient processing, has gone away ideally, because it's a waste of energy.
The reason I asked that, I know that might have appeared to be very quick, like give you a big compliment, then ask you a question. It was the comma in what I was saying, because what I've noticed, and the reason I state, a better husband, better father, better friend, better human, is because I'm handling things better. I don't want to spend a whole episode explaining what my road rage looked like or how I would handle things in process, but I can feel the difference. And look, from being on social media, I've seen that word thrown around a lot. That's why I wanted the clarification from you, the professional in the room, on what that is, because that's what I thought it was, and you just explained that. I feel like after ending with you, those pathways are still there. They're not fully died off yet, but more times than not, I react in a way that surprises me, in a good way now, right? There was a point in my life where somebody would cut me off, and I'd take it to the extreme because that's just what I knew. And I would be like, why did I just do that? Now somebody cuts me off, and I know I'm just sticking on this example because I had explained it to you one day. Somebody cut me off, and my first instinct within seconds, and this was after 2 sessions, was something must be wrong. They must be going to see a loved one suffering. Or I just went there and I didn't read into it. That was what I accepted, and I just kind of moved on. A couple minutes later, when my brain caught up, I was like, I didn't beep, I didn't swear, I didn't feel the anxiety in my chest. I was kind of like, wow. And that was the first moment when I realized, I'm like, I think this guy's really onto something. I'm gonna show up for more sessions, So thank you for explaining that. And again, that was the comma in my sentence.
I appreciate that because there's nuance to the brain changing its function moving forward. When you're building a new default way to function, what you have to be cautious about in the beginning is just how agile and clever our brains are at looking at what's going on around it and saying, okay, well, let's do it differently right now. The issue there is, and you have people come for treatment programs like this who, after 2 or 3 days, they say, I'm all better, I'm going back to my life. And that's great, that they can feel the effect of just how agile your brain is in changing the way it's going to operate today. But there's no expectation that it will persist as a behavior unless you've done it enough to make it the new default behavior. So that's why,
It's retraining your brain.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And I'll recommend to people, my comfort zone is 10 sessions before we reassess, because I'm pretty comfortable at that point that if a person does decide that's all they want to participate in, where they are at that point is probably going to be long lasting. But, it's sort of a generalization. Maybe somebody gets there by 7-8 days, but I don't want to risk it. I don't want somebody to leave after 5 or 6 days and then within a month or 2 or even less, they've just reverted. Yeah.
I will say, from the end user's perspective, second session, not just regurgitating what you said, but around the second session, I started to feel a little bit better. And I noticed the difference. Third session, though, I wasn't feeling so great. I was kind of like this is the reality of it. Because I purposefully did not look on Reddit and different websites for information. I wanted to just isolate and organically experience this. So around the third session, I was having vicious nightmares. Anxiety was creeping back up. Things weren't going so hot. But in my head, I knew something was working. Something was happening in there. And I was like, all right, I need to push through. By the 5th or 6th, I was like, I'm a new man. Now I'm going to keep rocking with this. And I just kind of, from that ebb and flow state, I knew to finish that 10-session protocol 100%.
Can I ask you something?
Of course you can.
So at that point, when you were feeling the struggle of the third session,
Yeah.
right? You said your anxiety was going up, right? And you're having nightmares.
Yep.
Okay, so can you elaborate on how you felt the anxiety going up and what motivated you to stick it out?
Sure. So the anxiety was going up because my suicidal ideation was coming back, full disclosure. And I was kind of like, damn it, why are we back here again? I was having vicious flashbacks. That's my PTSD. So my demons were starting to kind of pop up like, hey, we're still here. You know, like that was just how I was thinking. I was discouraged. I'm like, fuck. But then I kind of had the mindset of like, okay, I'm kicking up things. The devil you know versus the devil you don't, right? I didn't like how I felt before, but now this feels a little bit worse. And I was like, I don't know if I should do it. 3 reasons why I kept going. Not in any particular order. 1, I trusted Lars because he's very personable. He explained things, and I felt comfortable putting my faith and trust in him caring for me.
Gotcha.
2, my wife. 3, my daughters.
Yeah.
Those are my whys. That was my trust, and that's why we bulldog and pushed right through it. Look, Lars can back me up on this. Just as I'm sitting here adjusting, I got bad back pain, shoulders. I've messed myself up. Some of those sessions were brutal, but he had no issue turning the heat up on me. And I needed that. It was never like, finish this. He's not a personal trainer. And I think at any point I could have stopped. But he was right there to be like, all right, you're comfortable? Great. Let's turn it up. So.
Now, I'm really curious. Do you get like zapped? Like, I'm so confused on how that works.
So I'll tell you what I experienced, and then I think it's probably best that he explains what actually happened, right? So I'd walk in, and first thing we do a 20-minute round. I would have a cap on, and it was infrared, stronger infrared than what most people are getting on Amazon, things like that, to my knowledge. And it's penetrating at a cellular level, freeing up energy, I guess. And then from there, we would move over, and he would put wires on my head, and I would do at first like a game on a TV, and that was the dings and the inhibiting and things that he was discussing.
So you would actually play like a game?
I wouldn't play a game, no. So I'd be staring at a screen. The very first one, it was a pond, kind of like a channel. And again, there's no control, there's nothing. It's just my mind. I felt like 11 in Stranger Things. And so I'm like watching this, and the water would rise, it would fall, rise, fall, rise, fall. Once it rose to the top, a fish would jump out, and it would go ding, and then sometimes it would go ding, 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 or it would stop, then it would drain out. So it would do different things like that. Once my brain, I guess, was acclimated to the dings and what it was supposed to be doing, we moved into, I had a headset, so the augmented reality. And I would have the controllers, and I would be, solving puzzles and things like that. I would still have the dings and the stuff. After that, I would get shocked, but it wasn't too bad. It was only 2 milliamps. So, which we worked up to, and I had done a lot of videos before and afters, and I talked with my devil horns. So there are two sponges, electrodes maybe, and
Jumper cables.
Yeah, jumper cable. What are we doing? So I would have those hooked up, and I would do physical, I guess, exercises. So I would have the screen. We're back on here now, and there would be like, one was baseball. So a pitch would come in, and depending on what the exercise was for the day or for that segment, I would have to tap my right hand as, the ball's coming in, as the beeps are happening. Then we would switch. I go right hand, left foot. So different things. And if you were early, the gauge, the meter would be over here. If you're late, it's here. You're striving to get that middle, to get the ding, to get the reward, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's what my sessions looked like. I gotta say, before you take over and explain how that actually went, I probably butchered it, but even on my worst days, when I walked in there, within probably 25 minutes, we got past the infrared, the red light therapy. I felt so damn good.
Now, how long were the sessions?
About an hour. Coming from a world of doing talk therapies and ERPs, I've done Reiki, I've done all this stuff. After like 25 minutes, even on my worst day, I was like, whoa. So with that, if you could explain what we actually did, Lars.
Yeah, sure. No, that was good. That was good because the patient's perspective about what they're going to encounter is, I mean, you've not done most of it before. So yeah, that was your experience. The goal of the protocol is to start the treatments very conservatively and grow your endurance for them over time. The only way to do that is for your system to actually become more robust for them. But we don't want to push somebody so hard in the beginning that their system kind of files it in the threatening category. So we just kind of see where you are on day 1 and 2 and start very moderately. But perfect description. The first 10, 20 minutes, we would use photobiomodulation, which is exactly what you said.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um,
100%.
I don't even think you pronounced it right, but whatever.
We have different devices to accomplish that. So photobiomodulation is what's happening at the level of the cortex and deeper, if you have a powerful enough device. The idea is if your device is calibrated well enough and designed to penetrate deeply enough, it's just using near-infrared light to, yeah. The idea is it fires pieces of light, packets of light in the form of photons into the cells. And, our focus is neurons and the health of the neurons and the behavior of the neurons, but you have, bone cells and skin cells and all sorts of, things going on in there that are also being bathed in this near-infrared light. But our focus is get the photons into the mitochondria of the neurons. So here's the long and short of it. The mitochondria, as we all know, powerhouse of the cell. So the idea there is, and this is particularly important for our people who have sustained some damage in their ability to generate energy at the level of the cells, which long COVID did, post-mono, post-Lyme, a person's ability to even generate the energy at the level of the cell that it normally would has been compromised potentially. Not everybody, but people who report extreme fatigue after that, it's no surprise. This bypasses a lot of that process and just says, okay, I always describe it like it's like if I could put gas in your car from here. Just say, okay, well, your car now has enough fuel to do whatever it needs to do. In the case of the cell, that's waste management and replication and all of its fancy million jobs. But we're able to start the session by saying, let's boost your energy availability right before we get started with the hard stuff. So that's part 1. Then it also helps kind of wake the cells up and prime the tissue for what we're going to do next.
It's like a stretch before a workout.
Yeah, exactly. Then we would go into the neurofeedback, which is what you described. Playing a video game with your brain is a great description of it, but it's, in the beginning, it's just kind of your brain watching a mirror held up to its behaviors and saying, oh, that fish jumped when I did a specific thing, which we program into the software. And that's the thing I want. As in, I want your brain to do more of this and less of what we saw on the map.
The operant conditioning.
Yes. And so the more the reward happens on the screen and in your ears, the more that brain says, well, maybe I'll just do that thing from now on. So that's the operant conditioning. And it is simple and it is a difficult concept to be, again, to have your existence broken down in the simple terms like that. But it's an advantage. Because once we know we can manipulate the system or shape the system, you have free reign to say, okay, well, what function do I want to increase out of this? How do I want to use it in my favor? Next, after the neurofeedback session, we would do neuromodulation technique in the form of transcranial direct current stimulation.
That's a
There you go.
mouthful.
And some more popular forms or more well-known forms would be transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS. A lot of people have at least a glancing familiarity with that
Magnetic stimulation.
Correct. TMS, where they put the big coil over your head, and a lot of folks go do TMS sessions for medication-resistant depression is probably the best known use of it. But again, it's modulating the behavior of the neurons using magnets. I use electricity. There are several kinds. And now ultrasound is really coming into the research and looks great for a very directed ultrasound treatment. But
Like an actual ultrasound of your brain?
well, it's not the kind that you use. It's not diagnostic ultrasound where you take a picture. It's really using sound waves
Okay.
to modulate the behavior of the neurons.
Okay.
So to slice that up, just taking a step back. So when we would do, what was the second step?
Neurofeedback?
Yeah. So within the neurofeedback, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I would be watching the fish, I had to kind of learn what would make them jump, what wouldn't. Not that I could control that, but I would notice that they would stop jumping or the water would drain when my body was tense. Anxiety, PTSD, fight or flight, I tensing. That's me feeling like I'm going to pass out. That's me not breathing properly. So when I would take a breath, when I would release tension, they'd start jumping again. And I notice in real life, I just did it a minute ago, as a matter of fact, I started to feel a little antsy. So I quickly was like, what's going on? And I felt the tension in my core. And I was like, okay, so that's what that was doing.
Wow.
For me, with the fancy words.
Right. This is a caveat, but what I love about neurofeedback is your job really, while you participate in the activity, can be broken down into just sit and observe and let your brain learn from it. Because, every person who comes in says, well, what am I supposed to be doing? And I can tell people, here's what patients have reported really works for them to kind of get into the zone or manipulate what's happening on the screen. But the reality is it's a function of our brain to just take in what's happening in the environment and to make correlations with, could I affect this? What did I do? Should I do that from now on? It's all the wiring. It's all the program that we're running off of. And so in any operant conditioning scenario, what you want to do is set the conditions so that the brain has an opportunity to recognize, you know what? Things just seem to go better when I do it this way. And go better means the fish jumped. But it was advantageous for the brain because the brain is always trying to learn how to increase its survivability in general terms. And so it's an easy leap to say, well, if we just demonstrate to the brain that things go better for it when it does this, you can train it into those different brain waves, so to speak, relatively simply. But in a lot of practices that use neurofeedback, you'll see most often, and I think this is still true, most often it would be coupled with some sort of behavioral health, therapy, mental health approach. And that's great. But because that is not my scope of practice, I'm always looking for how to use the equipment to contribute to the brain's rewriting of how it's going to do things and increasing its capability. So using it as a neuro-rehabilitation tool instead of, like Christian can tell you firsthand, we never started the neurofeedback, and then if I see the fish aren't jumping, I say, I noticed the fish stopped jumping. Let's talk about your emotions. Let's talk about what happened there. It's not like that. It's relatively hands-off because I'm staying in my lane and letting the process kind of happen, but it's also why it doesn't dominate the session. It's sort of a subtle and nuanced guiding, so the brain knows, I think I'm supposed to be heading in this direction, and every other tool is meant to build its capability to get there.
And then you have your scales where you're implementing throughout maybe every third session or so to see where they are. If they started at 13, are they coming down to a 10? Hence, even further, but towards the end of the cycle, is that how you evaluate like their emotional status?
Oh, so we're
From the
talking about their
self-reporting?
subjective rating.
Yes.
Yeah. So actually, I leave it out completely until session 10. We just work.
Because my mind is racing from my end of things as a therapist, and I'm seeing how this would be of such value to my clients that are experiencing anxiety, depression, anger management, communication skills, whatever the issues are, I could see this being of vital importance. And then if they're learning to create a new structure, they're learning new patterns, and they're developing the neuropathy that's doing that, I'm curious to see, after a few sessions with you, when I talk to them in session, as to what changes are they identifying in their lives. I'm wondering if I'm going to hear the correlation. You know, I'm interested to see what that would look like.
Human beings are complex, as we all know. One person's report may be quite different from the next person's report about how it's affecting them and what are they noticing. And some people don't notice anything by session 5, which is why I'm tracking, well, your brain is performing better, so I think we're on the right track. Let's keep going. But the way I love to describe this work is, think of it like a gym for your brain. This is a workout routine. We're getting your brain to build itself up into new physical architecture that translates into function. And where the practice of therapy and any mental health intervention is essential to keep as a part of this person's care plan, is that I describe to people, imagine that I'm the mechanic. You came here and we're tuning up the engine. And so it doesn't encroach on anybody else's, their scope, where if somebody comes to you and they say, I'm really struggling, and you say, here are tools, let's process that. Tell me about how you're doing with that concept, right? And speaking very generically. But when they come to me, I'm like, no, we have to build in a new scaffolding for you to even accomplish. We're tuning up the engine. Where you go with it and what you do with it and how you use it most effectively, that's right back into your lane. And of course, any provider, because there are a million different ways to improve our quality of life.
Mm-hmm.
But, and this is where I obviously have bias, until you're running with the best engine possible, how effective are all of those things going to be for you?
Very true.
You know, you may be impeded in your ability to engage with those things if your brain is really not functioning the best that we can get it functioning. So yes, there are plenty of people in the world who are doing just fine without this and just fine without therapy, etc. It's when we identify that the brain is struggling, either because, well, more often than not, in my case, we see people whose thresholds for how much stress they can handle are compromised by this decrease in their function. And so, like you described, we were testing those thresholds by day 3. Your system was saying, I was already carrying a lot, and now you're making me do this other stuff. And now here are some symptoms as a result of that. But by day 10, I'm absolutely confident that we had built your thresholds, how much cognitive load you could carry before your brain even, before it even tips over the line and says, I actually can't manage this anymore. And so that's where I would say, if we were going to just break it down into the simplest concept of why somebody might report that their anxiety symptoms reduce or their depression symptoms reduce, etc., it's not because we came in and broke down your whole life. That's not my role. My role is to say, well, how hard can we push this engine before it starts to throw up some signals that it's struggling? That's my goal. Build, make it strong.
I think the reason I had the success I did with you, and again, there's no way of knowing the alternative, but from the different therapies I've done, I feel as though that put me in a good position to be more receptive to the type of work. Yeah.
Yeah.
It definitely goes hand in hand.
Well, you have to be open, and your brain has to be willing to do the work.
Absolutely. And look, I've been saying this to a lot of people that I've been trying to explain what we did. Whether you're high functioning or whether you're freshly out of an IOP program, anybody can stand to have brain optimization done.
I feel like I'm missing something now.
You are. Oh, 100%.
Like, I'm going to call you on Monday, I think.
Like everybody needs to do this, and that's the point I was trying to get across. Like, it doesn't matter who you are. Okay, I don't have anxiety, I don't have to go see him. Never had a stroke, I don't need to go see him. No, it's not the point. You're taking your baseline and you're giving yourself a better baseline. I had said to them before you walked in today, for a long time I wasn't firing on all cylinders. Now, that was from losing family members to suicide. That was people with cancer. Like, there was a lot of loss. There was chaos. It was nuts for a long time. But, so that led me to not firing on all cylinders. I just want to say this correctly. After working with you, I'm still not firing on those cylinders. I have a new engine. And that's what I was saying to them before you walked in. Like, and like, I don't want to put that out there and put a stamp on it that that's what it's going to do for you. But, for me at least, I was chasing this feeling like I did once before. And this work gave me a new baseline. And I'm like, thank God I'm not firing on all cylinders how I used to be. I'll take 2 of these cylinders, this new established baseline, versus all on the other.
So what I'm hearing you say is that instead of chasing the person you were years ago when you were fine, healthy, right? Before these issues hit you.
Sure, yeah.
You're getting acclimated to the person you are today.
Yeah.
Who's a different person than they were a few years ago. They should be.
Yeah, and look, that's difficult. I'm not a professional, but just from my understandings from different therapies, as humans, we want what we know. We want what's comfortable. We want what's the word I'm looking for here? Certainty, right? So to step into this new world of uncertainty, it's a little intimidating, but somebody explained it to me. It's like going to the beach, jumping in the water. It's freezing. Stay in, you'll get acclimated. It's way better.
Right.
Stepping into this new world. So yeah, that's exactly where I was at.
Yeah. And there's buy-in as well, just like it is with psychotherapy. If I'm going to therapy, I have to engage at some level that this person that I'm talking to is going to help me process my pain. But if I'm going to go in there and say, this is bullshit, well, I'm not helping myself, because I've already decided, that whatever process I'm going to engage in is not going to work.
So that's kind of the beauty of this type of treatment too, though, is if you imagine somebody who says push-ups don't help anybody, but they still get down and do their push-ups, they're going to benefit. Yeah. As long as they don't injure themselves or do it the wrong way. If you engage in it, you can expect a certain outcome, no matter what you said or expected. And that's the beauty of this. And I tell people all the time, your job is to just come in here and do the treatments, put in the reps. And how many reps were there by the time we were done with that one tool?
Thousands.
Yeah. People may do 10,000 repetitions in 10 days. It's not an accident. We're forcing something, and it's for the right reason. But it doesn't matter how you feel about it at all. And that's not to be dismissive. I want people to be optimistic about it. But in terms of we're not crossing our fingers and hoping that there is some benefit to somebody. You water the plant, and unless something standing in the way, the plant's going to grow. And so that's where we need the flip side of the same coin, your work. Because I'm not doing any of that, really. I'm not doing any of the guiding and the helping process and the let's dig into your life experience. I'm saying, you ready to do 10,000 jumping jacks? Because you're going to get strong. And of course, we want to do that in a nuanced enough way, and we want to stack our treatments so that they benefit from each other and catalyze each other. Just consider it perfect practice. But at the end of the day, nobody comes in and sits down and 10 days later they walk out with that result. They come in and they work. So,
have you worked with clients that there wasn't any emotional distress, but they just had this gray cloud?
oh, sure.
That's really what I struggle with. Ask my wife. It's just walking through a fog sometimes. Whether it's just a long day or whatever the case may be. But it's and there are other points in the day when it's yeah, life is good. I'm cruising, I'm doing what I need to do. Then you hit a point, you know, 'cause I have low blood sugar, I have diabetes, you know, and I got to watch what I eat when I eat it, you know, and if I don't, it's like a crash. But there's a mental crash as well that I feel, you know, and it's like I've got to push, and I'm in those moments I'm like I'm on overdrive just to function, you know.
So this goes back to the thresholds concept. You know, you're describing something that has a metabolic origin and that has an effect across all the systems of your body. But if you've managed for that and you still feel like you have a fog, or that your system is so easy to push beyond its endurance, beyond its thresholds for how much it's willing to handle before it kind of just stops showing up for you to some extent, that's where the brain map tells us. And of course, we can make inferences. I can make guesses. I can say I'd probably slap some electrodes here and here, and we can. But the brain map will confirm what we suspect and say, well, let's get into your health history. Do we have something as simple as a post-COVID infection that altered the way your brain is generating energy in these areas for you? Do you not have enough slow wave activity, meaning when it's time for you to recharge your batteries, you go to sleep, your brain doesn't enter into those deepest segments of sleep so that you can have restorative sleep. And that's kind of a repeating behavior for you. So then you're kind of always walking around depleted. We'd be able to collect some of that information objectively and say, what if we reverse that? How would your day-to-day function feel?
And from this treatment, you could affect. What I'm hearing is that from going through this process, you would able to change my sleep patterns because of the neurological impact.
Yes, ideally. Now, this is where it gets into the complexity of knowing your entire patient history. You know, this is not something we just dive into and say, yeah, 100%, I think we're going to be able to affect this for you. You want to approach it like it's an incredibly complex situation, because it is. It's brain stuff. And so the short answer is yes, we help people improve all of these symptoms we've discussed, and including right now working with stroke patients who are relearning how to talk and read, and that's a regular patient population for me. People with neurodegenerative disorders who want to maintain their function as long as they possibly can, despite what's going on in the background, trying to build faster than things are being broken down potentially, where we can. Every person is different, and so to say, could you help me with sleep? My first answer is this is a really good way to affect somebody's sleep and improve it. But the how your sleep got how it is massively complex, and we got to dig in. So yeah, you see how cautious I am. But that's where the hope is, because if we can identify how your brain functions differently right now from the normative database, we have our first clues. And maybe if I get it acting more like the people in the normative database who are asymptomatic, maybe a brain that appears to be or looks like the asymptomatic brains is in fact asymptomatic. But this is something we haven't hit on at all, and it's really important. The function of a person's brain can be modified by many different factors. So brain injuries and concussions are a regular patient population of mine, but also people with a history of long-term extreme stress, people with childhood trauma. Our brains are such an incredible computer that modify their function on the fly, and they do so to maximize our survivability. And so you take a little kid and put them through something horrific, and their brain says, I'm going to do this from now on. I am not driving a comfort machine. I'm driving a survival machine. And we operate that way. We say, okay, after a point, of course it matters how the brain got this way function-wise, but it doesn't matter as much regarding our approach for how we're going to get it to do something else moving forward. We're still going to use this approach and these combinations of tools to show the brain that it is in fact capable of doing something differently from now on. It's a lofty statement, and it's true almost every time.
I did it. I feel like it's
it's
real.
I'm just sitting here like my jaw's on the floor, because it's amazing to think that you can change or alter your future just by doing these procedures or projects or
These
whatever.
sessions.
Thank you. I'm like, what's the word I'm looking for?
You need to be zapped.
I do. Hey, listen, you need a guinea pig. I'm all for it because I would love to change things from the way that, I was raised, or the way that I've conditioned my brain to think about after having my daughter, or just anything, just it's amazing to know that that option is there to transform your life.
So that's the nuts and bolts of it, but what I'm picking up is, what are you doing after? Is to establish that now into routine, right? So now he's kickstarted the neurons in your brain to
what do you do?
accept a certain way, right? And if I'm wrong, like, please tell me. But what I'm getting is that you do the jump start, right? And the patient now has to follow through by developing that new routine and, taking on the challenges that life is giving you. But they're able to process at a different rate than they were before because of the intervention of developing these new neurological pathways.
You can see I'm very guarded about what I say yes and no to, and you're right. And here's the thing: when you build a better way for your brain to function as default responses to stimuli and default processing efficiency, you have to do something. Something has to happen to knock it out of that. Now, time is neurodegenerative. Over a long enough period of time, things just don't work quite as well unless you maintain them, which doesn't have to mean you're, spending 3 hours a day doing intense neuro maintenance or anything like that. But in the absence of an injury so you've built up this new function, in the absence of an injury that knocks it out, or some experience that gets in the way of it functioning or alters that function, we can expect it to maintain that new default level of function without having to do much to maintain it. And I say that with the caveat of, if a patient comes, does this protocol, and then goes and they exercise 3 to 5 times a week, and they watch their diet, and they have a good social life, that person's outcomes in the long term are probably inherently better, and their maintenance of what we've built is probably a lot better than the person who says, this is the best it's ever been. I've never been more prepared to sit on the couch and eat potato chips. So we have an expectation that you have to maintain your health, but I don't really, as you know, I don't give a lot of homework. I tell people the maintenance of what you've built here probably depends on how much care are you taking of yourself generally. But that's the same as any other health system, body system.
This isn't a cure-all. It's not the secret sauce, right?
No,
But it's a very powerful tool when used correctly. I was doing, it's separate from this, but to explain that, because this is how I understood it. So I was doing vestibular physical therapy. That was an approach I was taking for my dizziness, right? I could just go there once a week, twice a week, 1 hour, that's it, and then just kind of do whatever on the back end.
Right.
But it mattered what I was putting into my body, how much I was hydrating, if I were doing the workouts and the stretches on the back end, right? That's something that going into this with Lars, I understood that I need to do work.
Yeah.
He's going to give me the tools. He's going to show me how to use them, but I need to maintain on the back end and continue to do what I can do. I don't have the actual tools that he has yet, but, it matters, therapy, whatever else I can do to help support the work that I did with him.
But that's on you, right? To identify.
That's all I mean. That's what I'm saying. Like, I can't walk in there and be like, I'm feeling this. I had a bad childhood. This person died, whatever. Lars, fix it. Take it all away. No, I got to do the work.
Right.
Yeah. And that's what you were making. But again, just jumping in as somebody who just did it.
No, just making that clear for everybody watching is that this is not an infomercial, first of all. But looking at the science of this, it's only going to go so far. and depending on who's going to sign up for this procedure, being aware that it's on them to carry it to the next level. It's on them to be consistent. Ownership is on them, to carry through, right? And to do the 3 workouts a week, well, you need to go to the gym, It's like it's fine for you to write it down saying, here's a plan for you, see you next week or whatever it is.
It's changing your habits.
Right. And it goes back to, and I always taught that to buy in. Like, you got to buy into the process, not just wait there, waiting to be spoon fed. Here comes the choo-choo train. And it's not that, It's that you have to be an active participant. If you're setting a goal for recovery or a goal to stop smoking or a goal to, be higher functioning cognitively so you could get your job done, okay, so let's look at that. That's where I think the therapy process helps slice that up into digestible bites, but the mechanics of the science behind what Lars is doing, if that can, just the sheer fact of, I'm still absorbing this, but, you strengthening neurons to develop those pathways to help someone process is huge. I don't understand why this is not like a forefront thing already. Why isn't this being absorbed by HMOs all over the country?
Well, I believe it's easy to say that's a pretty slow-moving process, getting quote new techniques absorbed into the existing system, but there's a complex answer there. And what I'm most focused on is, and this is why it's really important for me to describe specifically what you just said about and what you said earlier about creating a new baseline and what do you do next. That is on the individual and hopefully guided by the professionals in their lives to say, have you tried this? I recommend that. It's not uncommon when a person is going through their schooling in any system to say, this is the best way. And maybe even they initiate a little bit of infighting with people who do it differently than them. And my approach is different. We need everybody who is a professional, who's in charge of helping people feel better and function better, to be in charge of their slice of that pie, because it's complex. And so it's absolutely essential that we team up. And a care plan that's guided by a team where I'm not shackled to any kind of delusions of grandeur. I'm in charge of this slice, and if I can afford to, I want to have some blinders on so I can do my piece expertly, because I know your part is handled expertly. And then we don't have to worry about whether there's something unaddressed there, because they have a person for that. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into the concept, the idea of why is it not more well accepted to do or known or reimbursed to do treatments like this. What I focus on is, well, how do we want it to be? And are we making those relationships with the other providers so that we can move that forward? Say, look, this is how the world works now. People are working together to create best outcomes for patients. Is the system going to pivot with that? Is it going to respond to that? Because I think that's what I want to focus most of my attention on building. And it's happening, and I've been very fortunate since starting this practice in particular. All of the people that I've met who are supposed to be taking care of people are very invested in that. And so we work together rather than, it can be difficult within the system. There's no getting around that.
Well, everything's about data, right? So you got to show data and show that it works, in indisputable, formats, Yeah. Hey, Dr. Lars, I'm very appreciative of you joining us today. I think we covered a lot of ground that needs to be digested. For people out there that are interested, in signing up and having some sessions with Dr. Lars and finding out more, please reach out to our Guiding Tides website, and we'll have his information up and ready.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being here.
You can
My
only
brain
ever
is
scratch,
like,
yeah.
I would love to have a follow-up taping maybe a year from now because I want to sign up and I want to see where things are at,
Awesome.
before and after,
Fun.
and just talk honestly about that process,
Unless
Yeah.
it doesn't go well, then no.
Yeah, don't scrap it. Yeah, exactly.
Mahesh's going to show up to a session with a dictionary so you can understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I gotta constantly, look up these terms.
Same with me, please. I'm like sitting here like, what?
A lot of acronyms.
Yes, but I understand. You've made it so simple to understand what you do. So I really appreciate you being here and having this conversation with us because it's just amazing to know that there are other options, there are other treatments. If you feel like you're at a dead end with therapy or with certain things, behaviors that you've been doing for yourself, there are other options to try to reframe and rewire your brain.
Right.
So it's just so good to have that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm blown away.
Well, again, thank you for coming. Appreciate you giving us your time today, and seriously, thank you for the 10 sessions you gave me. It's been amazing. I can't wait to do more, and we'll follow up with that as well. But for now, that's it.
All right, peace. Thanks, guys.